Hello, Mission Church of Lexington. This is Pastor Donovan, and welcome to this week's edition of From the Pastor Study. I take this weekly opportunity to share with you some answers to tough questions. Questions about the Bible, questions about the church, questions about the Christian life. I'd love to hear from you. If you have questions you would like to see me answer, please email me, pastor@missionchurchlex.org. pastor@missionchurchlex.org. The question we'll answer today is a question that I've received. It is this: what does the Bible say about Christians tithing? And to add to that, should I tithe on my gross or my net income? Let me try to answer that for you from a pastoral perspective and from a biblical worldview. Many Christians struggle with the issue of tithing. We recognize that our finances are really a part of our discipleship. Jesus himself spoke much about material wealth and the way that his followers, God's followers, use their wealth. How they view it, how they earn it, and how they steward it are all important to God. Jesus says that where our riches are, our heart will be also. I sometimes say that the last thing that gets saved and sanctified on a person is often their wallet. So we want to make sure that we're being good stewards or good managers of all the resources that God has provided for us. Some Christians, and churches I should say, overemphasize finances. It's all about money. Certainly that is not pleasing and honoring to God. But a church that does not speak about money, or a pastor that does not teach upon stewardship, is robbing the people of a holy habit, an opportunity of discipleship, because our finances are very important to our spiritual growth. Tithing and giving is intended to be a joyful thing, a blessing. It's certainly a duty, but even more so a delight. Tithing itself is explicitly a directive and a requirement under the Old Testament law. We see that in a variety of places in the Old Testament. Leviticus 27:30 says this: "All the tithe of the Lord, whether the seed of the land or the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord." Numbers 18:26 says, "Speak thus to the Levites, and say to them, when you take from the children of Israel the tithes, which I have given you from them as your inheritance, then you shall offer up a heave offering of it to the Lord, a tenth of the tithe." Then 2 Chronicles 31:5. "As soon as the commandment was circulated, the children of Israel brought in abundance the first fruits of grain and wine, oil and honey, and of all the produce of the field. And they brought in abundantly the tithe of everything." So the Bible teaches about a tithe of the first fruits, not our leftovers, but the best, not just the secondary things or not just the leftovers, but we're to give to God joyfully and sacrificially. In the Old Testament, they were giving of their crops and of their oils. Today, we as Christians can do so, the same principle when it comes through our finances, what we use to sustain our lives. But in fact, in the Old Testament, there was actually multiple tithes. One for the Levites, one for the use of the temple and the feasts, and one for the poor of the land. This would actually push the total in the Old Testament to around 23.3%. So it was a significant financial contribution that the Old Testament followers of God gave as an act of worship and act of obedience. Now I want you to know this, that the tithe is not just under the law, it actually predated the law. We learn in the book of Genesis about Abram when he gave a tenth to Melchizedek. That was before the law was given in Leviticus. And that same principle of giving generously and sacrificially to God transcends into the New Testament under which we live today. The tithe is something that is no longer binding under the law, but we get to enjoy now under grace. Here's some New Testament principles about giving. 1 Corinthians 16:2 says, "Upon the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something in store, so that when I come, there's no need for a collection." Paul was saying, as a Christian, as a church, set aside financially for the purpose of the work of the Lord, not haphazardly, but with intentionality. We also learn in 2 Corinthians 9:7 that God loves a cheerful giver. He's not looking for a Christian that gives begrudgingly, but with a cheerful heart. So here's how I see this in summary. In the Old Testament, under the law, they were to give a tithe, a tenth of all their first fruits, of their income, if you will. Under grace, that we should be able to meet what was expected under the law and more. That we recognize that the tenth is a good standard to strive for. That we want to be a good steward of what God's given us, realizing that 100%, everything that we have as a Christian belongs to God. He asks us to give 10% to check our faithfulness and our obedience and our reliance upon Him. That we give that 10% to God off the top, the first, and then we are to be good stewards of the other 90% because it still belongs to God. That tithe is given to our local church. That we give to the church, that we are fed spiritually, that we're a part of that faith family for the work of the ministry. Just as in the Old Testament, the tithe went to the Levites in the temple for the work of the ministry. In the New Testament, we bring it to the church, our local church, for the work of the ministry, to support missionaries and to have a building and to have ministerial staff and to be able to be effective in buying curriculum and providing ministry opportunities. So we give not just to the church, but through the church for the work of the Lord. So the tithe should be our goal. If you're not able to get to the tithe yet, sacrificially give, striving to get to that 10%, but God may be able to bless you abundantly financially, and you can give above and beyond the tithe. What we call giving above the tithe is our love offering. So a tithe checks our obedience to God. Am I willing to trust God by giving Him 10% of my income? Then a love offering is checking our sensitivity to God. Am I willing to give above and beyond to causes and purposes such as a building fund or a capital campaign or to a Christian radio station or to a missionary? The list could go on and on. We give above and beyond as God has prospered us. So the way to think about it is this. It's not always equal gifts, but equal sacrifices. God is concerned certainly with the amount, but He's more concerned by the heart behind the giving. He's not asking for us to give in a begrudging way, but we give so joyfully and sacrificially as an act of worship to the Lord. That's why at the Mission Church we call our time of tithes and offerings a time of worship through stewardship. Is exactly what it is. It's worship through stewardship. Now the question about do I tithe on my gross or my net income? There is no biblical answer for that specifically. I had a pastor once say that just depends. Do you want a gross blessing or a net blessing? So just kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to say this. Give of your first fruits. It's been my wife and I's conviction that we give our tenth off of our gross income. Before we give to our taxes and before we give to our retirement plans and to the other things that we're committed to, we want to give the first fruits to the Lord. It's a recognition, an act of worship, saying that everything we have belongs to God, so we want to be faithful. I often use this line, 10% giving to God. So if you think about it this way, 90 cents with God's blessing on it will always go further than $1 without it. You can't outgive God. If you're faithful to God with your finances, I can assure you God will be faithful to you, providing your needs, not always your greeds, but He will provide your needs. So that's an answer that I give to you about should a Christian tithe? And should we tithe off the gross of their net? This is a holy habit, it's a spiritual discipline. Everything belongs to God. The tenth is a good standard to begin with, to strive for, but God may ask you and equip you and resource you in a way that you can be much more generous in your giving for the work of the Lord. Again, this has been this week's answer to a question given by one of you. If you have a question you'd like me to answer, please let me know. pastor@missionchurchlex.org. And I'd like to answer it very soon on a next installment of From the Pastor's Study. We hope to see you this Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock at the Mission Church of Lexington. We're located at 3288 Beaver Creek Drive, right here in Lexington, Kentucky. We're located on Man o' War between Richmond Road and Alumni. You can find out much more about the Mission Church through our website, missionchurchlex.org. missionchurchlex.org. Again, every Sunday morning, 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock. Sunday evenings, we have our mission groups, our small groups. And Wednesday, we have a midweek Bible study at 6:30 with programming available for all ages. We look forward to seeing you soon. And between now and then, always remember to live on mission. God bless you.